Ready? All right, if you would turn to 1 Samuel chapter 21. And we're still in our study titled Israel Wants a King. And again, we were not going to go this far into the story, but Saul, after I got to studying on this, Saul's still alive, and he is according to him and the people anyway, he's still king of Israel. David was anointed some time back in our studies by Samuel the prophet, because God has now chosen David as king, but he's not been put into power yet. And David is, again, like I've said in the past, it's as though David is buying his time right now. He's waiting till the Lord removes Saul. David doesn't know how that's going to happen. David has had, even with all the wickedness that Saul has done to David and wanted to do to David, and the Lord has kept him from it, David's had plenty of opportunity. He could have killed Saul himself. But that's not what the Lord wanted, and it's not what David is waiting on the Lord, in other words, at this time. Now, if you remember last time, David and Jonathan, Saul's son, who up until now was Saul's right-hand man, and he's kind of fell in bad graces with his father right now, because his father found out that he was helping David to escape. So David has escaped. Jonathan has alerted David that things are not good back at the palace, and that his father is still demanding his death, and there are men out there looking for David. So David and Jonathan made a pact. They swore by the Lord that that they were going to be best friends forever, but they had to separate at this time. They could no longer carry on their friendship, or Saul was going to kill at least one of them, if not both of them. So it had become that bad that Jonathan is even fearing for his life now with his own father. Now, tonight in chapter 21, and we should be able to get through the whole chapter. It's a fairly short chapter tonight. David does some things that we really don't understand, other than the fact we know that the Lord led him into these situations, and he's doing what the Lord wanted. But some of this you kind of wonder about. Why would you go and do that type of thing? That's what we're going to look at tonight. And I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers in this matter, because when you're in the position he's in, why would you do what he did? In this chapter. So we'll start with verse 1. 1 Solomon chapter 21, verse 1. Then came David to Nob, to Amalek the priest. And Amalek was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? Now, so Amalek is there alone. And David, from what we've been seeing, and it still appears this way, that David has some others with him, some other men with him. His servants, he refers to them as. They're his right-hand men. They're his elite fighting group. Some say that they were the officers that were under him in the army. I don't know. It doesn't tell us here. But he finds Amalek alone at the place of worship, and that wasn't very common. Normally, when the priest was there were other priests with him, or the singers, or whoever else. There was somebody else there with him, and he's there alone right now. And David said unto Amalek the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thine hand, give. Let's stop right there. So in verse 2, David tells Amalek, he lies to him, basically. It's kind of, it's a lie to save his life, basically. He tells Amalek that the king has commanded him to some secretive business, that he's not to tell anybody where he's at or what he's doing or why he's there. So basically he's telling Amalek, I can't tell you. It's a need to know type thing, it's you don't need to know why I'm here. It's the king's business. And so David tells this to Amalek, the priest, and then he says, now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. So he's hungry. 5 loaves of bread. He tells him, give me some bread. He's been traveling. And he says, and the priest answered David and said, there is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. So Amalek, the priest, David accuses him of, or tells him, he said, I know you've got bread here. I know, you priest get the leftovers from everybody else. They were constantly cooking bread and doing other things, making other things to eat out of what the tithe and offerings that were coming in from the people. But there were certain breads, certain loaves that was common that they could give to the needy. And then you had what we'll see here in a moment is the showbread that was not supposed to be eaten by anybody but the priest. It was holy. It was hallowed bread. And it was supposed to be the freshest of the bread. Well, David knows that he's got bread. Amalek lied to David. He said, we don't have any common bread. Well, yeah, you do. David tells him, there is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread. Now notice the stipulation here. For them to eat hallowed bread, the men, David and the men with him, had to be righteous. They had to be holy. They could not have been with a woman for however long before they got there. Well, they've been traveling, and we don't know how long for sure. He tells us that in a moment. We'll see in a moment, but at this point in time, we don't know how long they've been traveling. But we know, because we know the rest of the story, Amalek didn't at the time, we know that they haven't been with their wives or any women. I don't believe David, being the man of God that he was, I don't believe he would have surrounded himself with whoremongers at this point in time anyway, and the Lord was trying to protect him from that kind of stuff anyway at this time. So these would have been men who were upstanding and moral and possibly even men of God also like David. So they would have been okay to partake of the hallowed bread. And David answered the priest and said unto him, of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common. Yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So, they've not been with any women for 3 days. That's how long David has been on the run since he left his wife. So that whole time that him and Jonathan, the whole chapter of chapter 20 that we saw, that all took place in about 3 days, and up until now is about 3 days. And so his men, he says, are holy. The vessels or the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common. Yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So it is common bread, even though it had been separated. So remember sanctified, we did a study on sanctified not long ago. Sanctified just simply means that it's been separated. It's been separated from leaven, it's been separated from the world, however you want to look at it. In this case, it would have been separated from any leaven. It would not be, and it was also separated from the rest of the bread because it was the freshest. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. So they would not, it was my understanding that they would not remove the showbread until they baked some more to replace what they took off the altar there. And so that's what they've done. They're going to offer the showbread to these men with David, and they'll put back hot bread in its place. That's how it worked. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. In other words, he was there to worship. He had been held up for worship. A man, one of Saul's servants, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. Now, it says an Edomite, and some will say that, well, why did the king of Israel have an Edomite, somebody who would have been one of his enemies? Some say that, there was a time where some of the people of Israel, remember some of them moved over into Edom and then came back, or were forced back, or were killed at some point. Some say that this man was possibly one of them. Maybe he was a Jew, but he was born in Edom. I don't know. The scripture is not clear at this point. We just know that he's an Edomite. That's where he's from. He was the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. So he's somebody pretty high up in Saul's kingdom. He's over all the herdsmen. So he's there worshiping, and now David's there. And you would think, and we'll learn more about this in the next chapter, next week, but you would think that this man Doeg, once he sees David, he probably knows who he is, that he's going to run to Saul and tell on him. And David said to Amalek, and is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. So here's David, who at one time was Saul's armor bearer. He was at one time the chief captain over all of Saul's army. And he doesn't have a weapon with him. It's kind of odd, wouldn't you think? If you're Amalek, wouldn't you think that was odd? That here's this mighty man of war, and yet he has no weapon with him. And he's on the king's business. But he says, because of the king's business required haste. I had to hurry and get out of town. I had to, what the king wants me to do, I had to hurry and run, leave everything behind and go. Well, that doesn't make any sense, really. Why would the king send, if the king is sending you out for some important mission, even if it's a secretive mission, why would he not send you out with your weapons? So David's story here keeps going. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. But Amalek believes him. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. Well, imagine that. There's Goliath's sword, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah. Behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. What is the ephod? That's what the high priest would wear during sacrifices. It was like an apron. When he wasn't wearing it, it's my understanding that it hung on the wall, something like on a coat rack or something, is what we would call it. So this sword of Goliath is wrapped up in a cloth behind the ephod. It's hid where the common people don't know where it is. And he says, if thou wilt take it, take it, for there is no other safe that here. And David said, there is none like that, give it me. So David knows, remember how big Goliath's sword was? David could barely pick it up when he was a boy. And he cut Goliath's head off with it. Well, here it is again. And he takes it for protection. And notice Amalek, the high priest, offers it to him. David asked him if he had any weapons, and Amalek told him, well, this is the only weapon we've got here. Take it. If you want it, take it. You earned it. You know, David, and remember when he killed Goliath, he had the right to keep all of Goliath's stuff, but he didn't. Now watch what David does in the rest of the chapter. Verse 10. And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. The king of Gath. Gath is where Goliath was from. Why would you go there? Carrying Goliath's sword. You can imagine, as famous as Goliath was, anybody who saw that sword would know whose it was. And the servants of Achish said unto him, is not this David, the king of the land? How did they know he was king? Well, remember the little song that the women were singing after David came back from battle? Here it is again. Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? So here, they don't know that God's made him king, but they know that he's greater than the king of Israel. He's more popular with the people in Israel. They know David could very easily be king. And David laid up these words in his heart. He was sore afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. Well, why didn't you think about that before you went there? You know, here's your enemy. You've killed their greatest warrior, and now you show up in their land with his sword, and you don't think they're not going to make fun of you, and they're not going to want to kill you? Can you imagine if this King Achish was the one who kills David, the great warrior of Israel? What kind of hero would he be? Hey, I killed the guy who killed Goliath. But that's not what happens. The Lord's not ready. He's not done with David. And he changed his behavior. Talking about David. He changed his behavior before them and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. In other words, he pretended that he was mad, that he was crazy, insane. And he just scribbled something on the doors of the gate, and just went to foaming at the mouth. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have ye brought him to me? Why did you bring this guy to me? He's mad. He's crazy. What do I want with him? It's not going to be any sport now, is it? If he was to kill David, there's no glory in it. He just wants him. Just get him out of here. He's lost his mind. Have I need of madmen that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? Don't even bring him into my house, and don't even bring him to the palace. Get him out of here. Get rid of him. Never tells them to kill him. He just says, get rid of him. Next time, and there's, again, as you can see, God's not through with David yet. He's not done with Saul yet either. Saul, in the next chapter, Saul has Amalek the priest killed because of what he's done to help David. David is still on the run. So this man Doeg, we'll see him again. He goes back to Saul and tells on Amalek, and Saul has him killed. Again, chapter 21 is one of those chapters where you wonder, what was David thinking? You know, he lied to Amalek to get food and to get a weapon, and then he flees because he's fleeing and because he's fearful of Saul now. He flees to Gath and tries to get a meeting with the king. And then when he figures out that, hey, this ain't where I need to be, he becomes more scared of the king of Gath than he does of Saul even. In the beginning of that story, you see where he's more scared of Saul than he is the people in Gath. How is that possible? You know, he's supposed to be a man of faith, isn't he? Well, we're seeing David's human side, if you want to put it that way. His faith faltered a bit here. He's scared of Saul, scared Saul's going to kill him, not realizing that if God's not done with him yet, it ain't going to matter what Saul does. In the same way with the king of Gath, if God's not done with David, the king of Gath can't do anything to him either. David pretends to be insane, and the king throws him out of the kingdom. He said, get him out of here. So we'll stop there tonight. David, next time we'll see David, more of his on the run from Saul. He goes from place to place, and people help him. Sometimes they know who he is, sometimes they don't. So we'll pick back up with chapter 20.